I have been a lot of things in my life, but a hospital man is not one of them. 22 months in the infantry, a forward operating base in Kandahar province, 3 combat deployments before my knees gave out. That is the sum of who I am. When the Army finished with me, I picked up a certification, took a job as an ER technician at Dunmore County General, and told myself it was good, honest work. That was true. What I did not tell myself, because I had not learned it yet, was that the best people I would ever see in that building were people the building itself could not recognize. Her name was Nurse Calloway. That was all I knew when I started. She worked the trauma bay on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, and she moved through it the way good soldiers move, no wasted steps, no theater, always facing the room. I noticed it the way you notice a level horizon after too long in rough terrain. I did not think too hard about it. I had floors to mop and kits to restock. The afternoon it happened was a Tuesday in November. The leaves outside the ambulance bay were orange and flat against the wet pavement, and the shift had been quiet up to 3 o'clock. Then Raymond Halford walked the floor. Halford was the new director of operations, 6 weeks in, always in a suit that did not fit the building he was managing. He had come from a regional insurance outfit, and he talked about the hospital the way actuaries talk about risk pools. That afternoon he had Dr. Voss with him, the senior attending, and the two of them stopped at the nursing station where Calloway was updating a chart. I was restocking the supply cart 12 feet away. I heard every word. "I'm going to make an operational adjustment," Halford said. He did not look at her when he said it, which I noted. "We're moving trauma bay nursing assignments to Dr. Voss's discretion going forward, effective today." Calloway set her pen down. "That means the cart rotation," Halford continued. He gestured at the supply cart in my hands without actually looking at me. "Pharmacy, equipment, linen replenishment. We need somebody consistent in that role." He paused. "You'll handle that for the foreseeable future." I watched her face. Nothing moved. "She's a liability in that bay, not an asset," Halford said quietly to Voss, just loud enough to carry. Voss nodded and said nothing. Calloway picked up her pen. She initialed the bottom of the chart, set it back in the rack, and turned to Halford. "Understood," she said. That was the whole of it. No argument, no color in her voice, nothing that gave him what he was looking for. She walked to the supply cart, took it from my hands, and started down the corridor. I stood there a moment. I will be honest with you. I felt something watching that, some specific and unnamed anger. I had seen that transaction before, not in hospitals, but in other buildings with hierarchies and people who managed from above the work. You write off the one doing the job because the job itself has made them invisible. I went back to my kit. She worked the cart for the next 2 hours. I watched her work it the way she had worked the trauma bay, methodical, purposeful, no dramatics. There were other nurses on the floor who resented the supply rotation. She did not appear to resent it. She loaded the cart, ran the pharmaceutical returns, cross-checked the inventory against the supply manifest with the same focus she had given the charts. Whatever she felt about Halford was under lock somewhere I could not see. At 5:17 p.m., the radio at the nursing station announced a 4-vehicle accident on Route 9 with multiple critical. I have seen a trauma bay go from still to operational in 30 seconds. I have seen it go wrong in the same window. What I watched in the next 8 minutes was the difference between training and theater, and the difference between a man who has trained and a man who has only studied training. They brought in 3 from the accident. The first 2 were manageable. The third, a man in his 40s, unconscious, BP falling, went a bay 2 with Voss on the team. I was running supplies and I had a clear line to the bay. I watched Voss work. He was not wrong exactly, but he was reading the case the way you read a textbook, and the patient in front of him was not a textbook. The monitor told a story that Voss was interpreting too slowly, and I knew it the way you know things you have seen before in a different context. Calloway was in the corridor with her cart. I do not know if she heard something in the monitor's pattern or felt something in the room's tension shift, but she stopped. She set the cart against the wall. She walked to the bay door. "His trachea's deviated," she said. Voss turned from the patient. "You're on cart rotation." "His trachea is deviated right," she said. "Absent breath sounds on the left. If you open his airway without decompressing that chest first, you'll tension him into arrest." 2 seconds of silence. The monitor said something none of us liked. Voss said, "Step back." She had already moved. Not around him. She did not push past him. She placed herself at the patient's left side with the precision of someone who had done this in worse places than a trauma bay with overhead lighting and a full kit. Her left hand located the second intercostal space, while her right was already at the supply tray. She called out what she needed, and the tech beside her handed it over without hesitation, because her voice left no room for hesitation. When her sleeve pulled back over her forearm, I saw it. A band of fabric, olive drab, worn thin, worn like a wristband around her left wrist. On it, stitched in faded thread, a medic's cross. The kind that gets sewn onto a patch in a forward operating base when someone has time to do the thing right and nothing left to lose. I have seen that cross before. I knew what it meant about the wrist wearing it. She decompressed the tension pneumothorax. The monitor changed. The patient's pressure climbed. The bay was very quiet for a moment. Voss looked at the monitor. He looked at his own hands. He looked at her. She was already calling the next step to the tech beside her, not looking at Voss, not looking at the room, not looking at anyone the way people look when they want the room to see them. She had a man to keep alive and she was doing it, and that was the sum of her attention. They worked the patient for another 20 minutes. At the end of it, his pressure was stable and his color was coming back, and the attending from the next bay had crossed over to watch. I do not think he meant to cross over. I think he just came and then forgot to leave. Voss said something to Calloway at the end of it. I could not hear what it was. She nodded once, stripped her gloves, and walked back to her cart in the corridor. I followed her. I am not sure I had a reason. I think I needed to be near something real. "Where did you do that?" I asked, just that. She looked at the wristband on her arm the way you look at a thing you have stopped seeing because you have worn it so long. "Kandahar," she said. "Long time ago." She picked up the cart handle and started moving again. At 6:30, 4 men came through the ER lobby doors. I was at the desk when they came in. 3 of them walked on their own, 2 in civilian clothes, 1 in a field jacket, and the 4th came in a wheelchair pushed by the man in the field jacket. The one in the wheelchair was a former sergeant. I could see that much in how he sat, and he was missing both legs below the knee. Leading them was a man in his late 40s with close-cropped gray hair, and the bearing of someone who had stopped needing to announce himself a long time ago. He wore civilian clothes, a charcoal jacket and dark slacks, but he was military the way a bridge is military, built to carry weight. He walked to the nursing station and gave Calloway's name to the desk nurse. The desk nurse pointed down the corridor. Halford was standing near the station with a clipboard. He had been there for 10 minutes, probably reviewing afternoon numbers. He watched the 4 men come through without apparent understanding of who they were. The man with the close-cropped hair found Calloway at the end of the supply corridor. He stopped. The 3 behind him stopped. The man in the wheelchair angled himself to face her directly. The lieutenant colonel, I learned his rank later, stood at attention. Not parade ground stiffness. The real kind. The kind that costs a man something because it is given to someone who has earned it beyond argument. "Ironside," he said. The word carried down the corridor. Calloway set down the supply bin she was carrying. She looked at the 4 men in front of her, each one, in turn. Something passed across her face that was not sentimentality and was not pride and was not the thing you perform for an audience. It was the face of a person recognizing a debt that can never fully be paid from both directions. "Colonel Marsh," she said. The man in the field jacket, one of the ambulatory veterans, had his hands clasped in front of him, and his jaw set the way men set their jaws when they are not going to let themselves come apart in a public corridor. The man in the wheelchair had reached a hand out, palm up, and she took it. "We've been looking for you for 2 years," Marsh said. The desk nurse at the station had gone still. 2 of the attending physicians from the adjacent corridor had stopped moving. Halford was 6 feet behind the lieutenant colonel, clipboard at his side, and he had the look of a man who has just heard a word in a language he does not speak but understands is above him. Marsh spoke plainly. He told the corridor, because there was no other audience to tell, the corridor was the room now, that on a night in late summer 11 years ago, a mass casualty event in Kandahar province had lasted 24 hours, that 2 surgeons had gone down inside the first 13, and that a combat nurse with a bronze star and a call sign had run the bay alone for the last 11 hours until the relief team arrived. That she had kept 9 soldiers alive through that night. That he had been one of them. She made decisions that night that a doctor with 20 more years in wouldn't have made, Marsh said. He was not performing the telling. He was simply delivering the record as it stood. She made them right. All 9 of us went home. The man in the wheelchair still had her hand. Halford said nothing. There was nothing to say. The clipboard was at his side, and he was not looking at the LC, and he was not looking at Calloway, and the expression on his face was the expression of a man who has made an operational judgment and learned, in a public corridor, that he had judged without sufficient information. Calloway did not look at him. She looked at the 4 men in front of her, and she said, "Are you all right, all 4 of you?" The question hit the corridor harder than anything else she could have said, because she was asking it as a nurse, because 24 hours in a bay in Kandahar had not changed the fundamental nature of what she did. She assessed, she treated, she cared whether you were all right. The bronze star and the call sign were downstream of that. Everything was downstream of that. Marsh smiled. It was a brief, unsentimental thing. "Better than we should be," he said. I watched her walk out of that building with them at the end of the hour. She had filed her paperwork at the desk before she left, all of it in order, time-stamped correctly. She took nothing from her locker but her jacket and her badge. She did not look for Halford, and she did not stop to make a point to Voss. She shook hands with the desk nurse, said something that made the woman laugh quietly, and walked through the lobby doors. I stood at the desk, and I watched the doors close behind her. I have worked 3 more years at Dunmore County General since that afternoon. I still think about what it costs a person to be that competent in a world that reads competence as arrogance and calm as indifference. I think about what it costs to take a supply cart without argument when you have kept 9 soldiers alive in the dark with 2 surgeons down, because you have decided that the work itself is the point, and the recognition is not. I know what she was now. I knew it the moment I saw that wristband. The question I could not shake for a long time was whether she knew what we were when she handed the cart back and walked away, and whether she thought any better of us for what we finally managed to see. I think the answer to that question lives somewhere in the way she asked, the first thing she said to Marsh and his men after 2 years of searching, "Are you all right?" That is who she was. That is what we almost couldn't recognize.